Hi, gender studies students. This is week 5, and we are going to be talking about a sociological concept that I'm sure you all remember from back in your intro to sociology days, socialization. Remember last week when we were talking about patriarchy and how that is a social system that we inherit from birth. It's not anybody's fault. Not even in history can we point to any one person or society where it is their fault that patriarchy is the dominant social structure worldwide. We are going to talk about how we grow and learn and how that macro scale part of the social structure affects our socialization process. So, let's look at the thing that I tried to write like kind of straight on the board first rather than this kind of sideways one that I ended up with. This is just this section of the board behind me just gives you some key points and some key terms that you should have in a good definition of the socialization process in general. So this is a review from Intro to Sociology, but it's important for you to think about these concepts while you're reading the chapter from Sheila Jeffrey's book, Making Up is Hard to Do, is the name of her chapter 6 that you're supposed to read. It's linked in our week 5 folder. And then also the article from Brent Staples. Oh, what is the name of it? Just Walk On By. That's the name of it. It's a famous short article, a reflective piece about his power, the way he perceived he had power in the social setting as he walked home in the middle of the night after he got off work, and how he could alter social space potentially. So very interesting to read about those two different points of view regarding how dominance, male dominance in particular, WASP culture more specifically, affects some of our socialization process. So let me just give you a quick review of what socialization is all about. First of all, it's important to know that socialization is a lifelong process. It's a learning process, so you have to have learning in a good definition too, but it's lifelong. Socialization begins at birth, and some people will even argue that it begins before birth, because how many times do parents, when they have the financial resources, how many times do parents plan on the color of the crib or the color of at least a wall someplace they want, or the decorations or the sheets, or the colors of the clothing and things like that? We often make assumptions that baby boys are just gonna like blue, and somehow pink is encoded on the DNA of little girls. And listen to me, ignoring intersex as a potential category for your child to be born as. I'm doing this intentionally because next week we're going to look even more into the embodiment of gender and social expectations, not just this behavioral component that we're looking at this week. So we make assumptions about that child in our bellies. We make assumptions that the boy is going to just need to have a baseball mitt and a baseball, and the girl is just going to need to have a Barbie or something like this, right? Now, this is the more typical way that gender manifests itself in previous years. Of course, society is changing over time, and so there is a little bit less cram a doll down a girl's throat and a little bit less cram a baseball into a boy's hand as there had been before, but you still see so many messages in society overall that give people the idea of what their behavioral preferences are, look at my air quotes, supposed to be based on their sex category. Okay, so socialization is a lifelong learning process, and we learn through social interaction. So you and I are going through a learning process right now. It's an intentional learning process. If you are not writing some notes down right now, shame on you. You need to be going through an intentional learning process, writing down these notes. But every single day, from the moment that you take your first waking breath until at night when you fall asleep, you are going through social interaction. And through that process, you are learning different information that you need in order to function in your particular station in life, with your particular social groups that you interact with, all the different settings that you go from one place to the next in daily life. And also that behavior is affected, it's always affected by macroscale social patterns, macroscale expectations, such as that patriarchy that we discussed, and more particularly in the United States, the WASP version of patriarchy that we learned about. So all of those macroscale patterns that exist in our society affect the behaviors, the microscale behaviors and the social interaction that you and I engage in. From the golden book that a kindergarten teacher is reading her kindergarten class over Zoom right now, all the way up through, Medea, Tyler Perry's Medea, which I think we're going to be looking at in a future lesson in gender studies class. OMG, do I have a lot to say about that? But anyway, socialization is always affected by the macro scale patterns in society. It always occurs in the individual life experience, starting at least at birth through death, because our gender changes from child to adult to elder, and the expectations, the social expectations that our society places on us also changes. So socialization in general is this: when you tack the word gender onto it, you get some of the results that you're reading about in these two reading assignments that you have in the week 5 folder. Gender socialization covers the lifelong learning social interaction process that teaches us about sex. Remember, I have omitted intersex in our discussion today intentionally, not to diminish it at all, instead to highlight it for specific attention because we neglect it so much in USA culture. So sex category, sexuality, which we will also address in future weeks. Social position, this is your status and the role that goes with that status. I'm sure I've used the term gender role so far. Social position is your gender role in society. The behavioral expectations that people who you are with every day and society in general has about the category of people you belong to, these behavioral expectations are imposed on you as an individual because of the macro scale social patterns that we inherit. But also you engage in these behavioral expectations when you choose to behave in normal, wow, we need some major air quotes on that word normal, but when you engage in normal behavioral expectations based on your gender category, or if you intentionally want to stick out based on the socially expected behavioral conditions associated with gender, you are still being affected by the patriarchal pattern, the WASP pattern, all of that. So it's important to know if you intentionally buck the system, so to speak, in order to be in your face regarding behavioral expectations associated with traditional, I'm using so many air quotes today, traditional gender categories, you still are responding to those traditional gender categories, because without that measuring stick, so to speak, you wouldn't be able to gauge whether you are sticking it to the man regarding your rebuke. What's the word I'm looking for? Regarding your rejection. That's the word the rejection of those traditional gender categories. So we learn these things all through our lives because our gender category and our behavioral expectations, our social position regarding our sex classification does not stay constant from birth until death. And therefore, we have different behavioral expectations and we all learn it. So when Brent Staples is talking about people crossing the street instead of passing him on the sidewalk when he's going home, those people learned in the same way that he learned from the same system with different outlooks on life because they're from different social categories. And when Sheila Jeffries talks about makeup being a tool of male dominance, for instance, or even white dominance, it is because she's looking at macro scale patterns in society that perhaps put a yoke, can I use that word? I don't know if not eBay, what am I trying to say? If YouTube captioning is going to spell it correctly, I mean like a yoke like oxen have on it to pull a cart, whether makeup is actually like a symbol of slavery in some kind of way to the patriarchal system. At least, again, with my air quotes, traditionally. So there's a whole lot to think about regarding this week, y'all, and I look forward to your reaction papers because you always just amaze me with your insight. And please text me with questions, and I will see you again in our next lecture. Bye.